with that, we've come to the end of this summit, and I think it has been a very intensive, very rich conversation. It also shows that open data remains a key topic, if not becomes more an important topic as we move into the so-called fourth wave of open data. And so what I would like to do in the remaining 5 minutes, because I think this has already been kind of a marathon session on a very rich topic, is to really try to highlight a few elements that I feel were important from this conversation, but also that perhaps might provide some structure in thinking about how to move forward, and that we might want to come back to that as well. And I don't know, Andrew, whether we can quickly get the slide here projected so that we can quickly bring this to an end as well. I don't know, Andrew. If not, I can basically go quickly through those clusters. And again, I'm not going to take too much time because I think everyone probably wants to process what was said. But from my point of view, next slide, please. There were kind of four issues that I feel is important that in different ways have been emphasized. The first one, I think, is really as we are talking about open data, we are in a different environment. And I think Claire also referred to that anyway, 10 years ago, we had this notion of open data by default. Was a challenge. But now, indeed, there's a lot more concern that if you make it open, how will it actually be used? Will it be used as fodder for training? Will it be extractive? And so we really need to start thinking about reimagining openness. And it goes back to what Amandeep was saying at the beginning. How do we define openness in today's environment? And I think what we've heard is that openness is something that probably should be defined by the communities involved and should be co-designed in ways that creates shared benefit. And that's also, I think, what Jeremy was referring to in the context of data commons. And so that's kind of the first key element from my point of view that resonated with me. The other one was indeed that there are different levels of maturity and that we really need to start investing in kind of data readiness. That also means building new data sets with communities, as Venkatesh was referring to, but it also means new tools, as Claire was referring to. It's not because you have data that you actually can reuse it or that you even can discover where the data might reside. And so we need to also kind of really invest in this kind of new notion of data readiness and new notion of data maturity. And that is both an investment that needs to happen by government, but also what I heard strongly by the last panel, it's actually also an investment by the private sector, both civil society, philanthropy, and the industry. And the third element, of course, anyway, how I started off is that we actually do need to prevent the data winter. And there are positive signs. And again, I'm also always trying to be optimistic. But what we see is also increased enclosure. And I do also agree with Johannes that we should not forget that we actually have gone a far way and that we should celebrate where we are today. At the same time, typically I'm not pessimistic, but I'm also fearful that we actually may have more enclosure than before because of the fear of extraction, but also because a lot of the activities might not be what we call socially licensed. You might not have a social license beyond quite often consent to start reusing that data. And so the trust, if there is no social license, the trust is not there and data will not be made available, not shared, and it will also become much harder to then subsequently sustain, from my point of view, public interest AI or even the potential summer of AI in that context. And then lastly, and it goes back to what Jeremy was saying, is that when anyway, even Microsoft started the open data campaign, there was no understanding on what 5 years later might be determining the open data conditions. And I think as a community, we actually have to make sure that we future-proof our investments and our interventions, and that it's not fighting the last war. And so what we are trying to do also at GovLab is to really become more engaged in policy forecasting, technology forecasting as it relates to data, so that and it also relates to actually what Oliver was referring to, is that anyway, till November last year, we had never heard of MCP, and then suddenly a new standard comes along, and actually the whole notion of data readiness and AI readiness for data becomes kind of a different concept. And so we really need to, as a community, also be super vigilant on what's happening. And that also includes what's happening at the geopolitical space, because I think a lot of what we haven't really discussed today, but a lot of the geopolitical trends will impact open data. And we also need to be savvy enough and sophisticated to take this into account. So with that, I think let me close here and say a lot has been discussed. There's a lot of sense of optimism with regard to the role of AI, a sense of optimism that the communities are stepping up, and even philanthropies and the private sector and government see the need for investment. But we should also be cautious that what my sense was that 10 years ago, we were very optimistic about open data, that this would be anyway something that we could only improve, but we can also see very rapidly a backsliding if we are not keeping the momentum going, if we are not keeping the value of open data front and center and also document that, as Johannes was saying, we also need to actually have citizens see that this is important. And so I hope that this summit was a way to raise the bar again with regard to open data, keep open data on the radar so that it doesn't fall and it becomes a side event while everyone is focusing on AI. But also I hope what we saw today was that there is a community willing to keep going. And I thank everyone for that commitment and everyone for being part of today's session. And as I said, I'd learned a ton, so I will try to process everything, and we will share all of this back also in kind of a dedicated blog that then people can read who were not able to attend, mainly because we had to cross so many time zones in today's sessions as well. Thanks, everyone, and stay tuned. Thank you. Bye-bye.